Greetings, Starfighters. As you may well notice up here, yes, that is blue. Hopefully it's showing up on camera. I can't really tell. The preview screen's just kind of too far away from me. But yeah, it was my birthday several weeks ago now. Almost a month ago now, actually, when I'm recording this. So I dyed my hair again. You might remember I went purple briefly last year. Although oh, geez, did any of you actually, did I ever film an episode? Did I get to film an episode with the purple hair? I don't know if I had the camera yet. I don't. No. Okay. Total sidetrack. Mississippi River sharks, which I think I accidentally referred to as just Mississippi River shark at the end of the last episode. But yeah, I'm sticking to my idea that there's a mini theme going through the movies on this set of the American South, which, I mean, it's like, granted, I am well aware that the Mississippi River runs from the Gulf of Mexico up to the Great Lakes. But I do feel pretty confident in saying that they would not call this movie Mississippi River Sharks if the movie was set in Wisconsin. Much later than initially planned, here we are with Mississippi River Sharks from 2017. Plot summary courtesy of IMDb. Right under everyone's noses, a school of aggressive sharks finds its way to the broad Mississippi River, and before long they attack a slow riverboat, snapping off the unsuspecting tourists' heads. They don't actually show that in the movie. However, with the famous annual fish rodeo just around the corner, the local authorities are not willing to let a few rogue sharks get in the way of having fun, and of course making a few extra bucks, refusing to understand that now the underwater invaders have tasted the succulent human flesh. I love that they wrote it this way. They'll stop at nothing to get more. Yeah, actually, as I understand it, sharks generally don't want to eat humans unless they're absolutely starving. As I understand it, we literally just do not taste good to them. Back to the plot summary. Now it's up to an old familiar face, along with a team of locals, to lend a helping hand, and try to fend off the bloodthirsty aquatic assailants before they all become shark bait. But can they stop the ferocious Mississippi River sharks? So, the tone for the movie gets set pretty early on, and it's not a good one, as the first thing we see is a CGI shark. It's not even eating anyone yet, it's just swimming. Stock footage would have been better here, because it's a really bad CGI shark. We go from that to a guy with an eye patch smoking a cigar. So basically, Deathstroke, but lame. But this turns out to be a fake out. The scene we opened with was a movie within a movie, and we meet our next two characters as one, a young woman, waxes nostalgic about having watched the shark bite movies as a kid, and the guy, some tall, bald white dude, seems to give less of a fuck about shark movies than I do. And considering I'm not a huge fan of the subgenre myself, as I established at the end of the previous season of this show, that is saying something. Turns out this is a Tinder date, and considering the guy is spending his time looking at his phone and making fun of a series of movies his date is clearly into, it's not going to end well. And that's assuming neither of them get eaten before we get to the opening credits. Which I hope are really soon. This scene is so dull. Even when the guy takes off and his date spots him flirting with another woman on the boat, and oh yeah, it turns out they're on a riverboat, like the one on the first poster I found for this movie, and okay, sidetrack here. Why the hell was it so hard to find images for this movie on Google? I swear, more than half the images that came up when I very specifically searched for this movie were for other shark movies, including several that are in this set. And also a lot of shark movies that aren't, too. God damn, this is a massive subgenre. At least two of the Sharknado films were in the image results for Mississippi River Sharks. I couldn't even find many posters or DVD covers for this one. Now, anyway, back to the movie. A couple of bad CGI sharks end up launched onto the boat by its own, whatever that thing at the back of it is. I've never been on a Mississippi riverboat before. I only know that a lot of fiction depicts them as having casinos, even though I think only a few are actually like that. The guy on the date gets his leg chomped on by one of the sharks, and the cut to black before the title suggests the woman, who had borrowed an old lady's cane to attack one of the two sharks that had got onto the boat, got bit too. And then we have the title, finally, and some music that's a bit on the nose, but not bad. Fairly generic-sounding country music. Yeah, it's not exactly Steve Earle, but I can live with it. Certainly better than Florida Georgia Line. And if you don't know the band Florida Georgia Line, oh, how I envy you. We go from there to a hardware store that I mistook initially for a gun store, and two people who I'm assuming are going to be our main characters, a father and daughter. And it turns out I was right about that, although they do end up spending the bulk of the movie separated, but that's beside the point. I know we had a father and daughter at the start of the last movie, but these two don't give off that soon-to-be-eaten vibe. We don't have first names for them yet, so who knows. We also meet an over-enthusiastic journalist and her cameraman, and a co-star of the zombie shark movie I bought this set for, that it turns out, Jason London. Not to be confused with his twin brother Jeremy, the one who was in Mallrats. Jason actually plays himself in this movie, as it turns out. And later on, so does his brother Jeremy, but I'm getting ahead of myself. They're all at this location in the film for some big fishing competition. You can probably see where this is going, and it does get there, eventually. Okay, it doesn't actually take that long as screen time goes, it just feels longer. Not helped by the fact that I put this movie off way too long. I should have had this episode out by like a month before the day it uploaded, which may be the day you're watching, I don't know. It's tempting to try to rush through this one, but that's not really being fair to the movie. Though really the bad CGI is not being fair to the movie either. Makes the CGI in Santa Jaws look like it was done by ILM. We meet more people who give off main character vibes, and honestly, there's a few too many of them. Obviously, at least some of them are going to die before this movie is over. That's just a given. And, oh, okay, yeah, I'm remembering the movie now that I'm going over the script, and actually, no, they don't. No, not the ones I'm thinking of specifically, anyway. The point is, I'm struggling to keep track. I'm going to put that on the long wait, too. Well, mostly. It's also that a lot of these intro scenes don't give us these people's names, not even in a lazy exposition, as you know, kind of way. I know the rule is show don't tell, but without context, showing doesn't help much either. There were easily this many main characters in Santa Jaws, but at least with the majority of them being family, it was easier, for me at least, to follow who everyone was, even if I didn't use most of their names in the video, but I think you expect that from me by now. There's some character stuff here about the daughter character, who I'll call Tara from here on, since that's her name, and thankfully that's an easy name for me to remember. It involves college and the hardware store, yada yada, fairly standard stuff. If you've seen one movie about a child wanting to give up their dreams to help the family business while their parent doesn't want them to, you've seen them all. I'm sure at one point it was subversive, as the parents are demanding the child take over the family business story was very common, but as far as I can tell, the subversion has become the norm at this point. And this is where Jason London enters the picture, well, I mean, apart from the clip of him from the movie within the movie at the beginning, to see the fishing competition start off, and he tells the audience to look out for Shark Bite 6, Here Comes Santa Jaws. I
don't know, I've gone cross-eyed.
Anyway, now that my brain has been stuffed back into my skull, we get a mildly amusing bit with Jason London signing autographs and basically making fun of himself, acting like, well, like an actor with a bigger career than doing shark movies on the Sci-Fi Channel. Including a pass at the journalist I mentioned earlier. It's actually kind of nice that he has a sense of humor about this. I mean, not a lot of actors could be talked into, okay, your role is basically you're playing yourself, just more of an asshole. And there's a shoehorned in love story, it looks like, between Tara and one of the other mains. I'll bring it up again if both parties are alive at the end. I will say I've seen worse, so I'm not going to drag it. If anyone who's seen this movie before was hoping I would, sorry. At this point, 20 minutes into a 90-minute movie, the kills finally start ramping up. Or rather, the ones where we can actually see them. They're fine, but really Ghost Shark kind of set the bar high on creativity for shark kills in this set. More than halfway through the movie, Jason London gets eaten. This would have been funny had he died being the selfish Hollywood star type he'd been throughout the movie up to this point. Alas, he dies mere seconds after actually trying to be helpful and proactive. Look, movie, you can have your egotistical actor get his comeuppance, or he can have character growth. You can't do both. Or at the very least, you can't do both within the same minute. We get some more character stuff that doesn't really matter, some attempt at comic relief that isn't particularly funny, yada yada. A guy who would have been the next victim in the movie after Jason London gets saved by accident in a way that is so stupid I'm not even going to try and describe it, yada yada. A sheriff character gets taken out, but not by a shark. Not directly, anyway. Shark hits the boat of a drunk guy with a spear gun, he falls down, and the gun goes off, and, well... Too bad, actually. As cops go, this guy was fairly likable. Helps that he was fictional. A guy from earlier in the movie who was shown to have been cheating at the fishing competition dies too, but not in a way that was satisfying. Literally the one death in the movie I was looking forward to. Boo, Mississippi River sharks. Boo. Eventually, Tara comes up with a plan to rid the river of the sharks all in one go, involving a giant net, a tow truck, and a big pipe bomb. It's not as cool as it sounds. Also pretty sure it was overkill. The sharks were out of the water and trapped in a net. They could have just left them hanging there for a few minutes, and the open air would have taken care of it. Now, that may sound needlessly cruel, but keep in mind, the sharks are CG. And not even good CG. So the movie ends with the sharks dead, and with the girl from earlier in the movie turning up, not dead, as I'd initially thought, in the hardware store, where one of the other main characters, who I've not really talked about much because his character was basically big Jason London fanboy, is now working. That's right, the movie bookends with this one girl who really liked shark movies going from a date with a guy who didn't like those movies to flirting with a guy who loved the entire series and was traumatized by seeing its star get eaten. You know, in a better movie, this would be funny. Oh, and this is also the part where Jeremy London cameos in basically a commercial for the next Shark Bite movie, implying that he's just taken his brother's place in this franchise. Okay, well, anyway. Random thoughts I had while watching the movie. Yeah, I really tried, folks. I didn't want to have to rely so heavily on screen caps from my own video player again, but this entire set is just bone dry on the Google Images front. Considering how new most of these movies are, the oldest one in the set was released in 2010, that is frankly astonishing. Was that Santa Claus reference in the Jason London scene an ad for the movie that came out the year after this one? Or did someone at Sci-Fi see that scene in dailies and go, hey, I just had an idea for our next movie? The spot where the commercial breaks weren't as cleanly edited as they were for the previous movies. Hopefully there's at least one movie in this set that wasn't made for TV. The scene where Tara sees the severed head of the woman she'd sold a gun to earlier in the film would have carried more weight had the head not been the most obvious fake severed head I have seen in a movie made in this century. If there is one point I can give this movie, is that it lets people's words speak for how smart they are or aren't, and not the accent. While not everyone in the movie has a southern U.S. accent, the ones that do aren't all idiots, which, to be honest, is something I was afraid this movie might do. I won't pretend I've never been guilty of using that particular accent as shorthand for an ignorant bigot in conversation, but it's something I've been trying to do less of. I mean, let's not act like the southern region of the United States has a monopoly on willfully ignorant people. One of the biggest anti-masker rallies during the global pancetta, or panini, or pantera, and... Actually, wait a minute, why My channel's not monetized anyway. Why am I even using the code words? During the pandemic, one of the biggest anti-masker rallies during the height of the pandemic was in Orange County, California. Turns out the actress who plays Tara in this movie is going to be in Zombie Shark later in this set. And I think I already mentioned that Jason London's going to be in that too. This episode's cool shark fact. I got this fact from the movie itself, actually. Bull sharks can survive in fresh water. Pretty basic, I know. I'll get a more interesting fact for the next movie, promise. Final verdict. I think what really sinks this movie for me is the lack of a real attempt at an explanation for the shark's behavior. A throwaway line by one of the dumber main characters aside. Sharks in real life just do not behave this way, even when they are starving. I assume it's fairly common knowledge by now that shark attacks on humans tend to only happen in places where a shark's normal food supply has been drastically reduced by overfishing, pollution, or both. I could roll with it in Santa Jaws and Ghost Shark since there was magic involved. And even in a cheesy-ass movie like Deep Blue Sea, which isn't in this set, it just came to mind, they use the old sci-fi staple of genetic engineering gone wrong. But here, just 'cause. And that does not fly with me. I'll admit, killer animal movies in general aren't really a thing I go for unless it's something super silly, like with the snake from Hard Ticket to Hawaii. This movie fails, ironically, for not being silly enough. Santa Jaws may have been a letdown, but at least it aspired to something. Can't really say the same for this one, although ultimately I think I'll probably rank it higher than Santa Jaws because of how much of a letdown Santa Jaws was. But I mean, Mississippi River Sharks, it's got a few moments here and there, I guess. It's not going to be the worst movie of the set. I'm pretty sure about that when the wrap-up episode comes, but it is currently the front-runner for the most dull movie of the set. I mean, again, apart from an occasional, like one or two jokes sprinkled here and there, the only real fun I had to speak of during the movie were scenes when Jason London was getting embarrassed. Again, gotta give him props for having a sense of humor about this role. Anyway, next time I see y'all folks, we'll be staying in the Deep South for a movie called Ozark Sharks, which is one of the ones that has some of its images showing up in the Google image results for this movie. So I'm probably going to be needing to keep my finger over that print screen button again. Anyway, have fun, stay safe.